This is our home now, Dad. You can sit in your room. My son-in-law said that to me on my own Thanksgiving table. The table I built with my own hands in 1987, in the house I've owned outright since 2003. He actually believed it. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me what time it is, where you are right now. The snow had started before dawn that Thursday morning. I remember because I'd been up since 4:30, the way I always am since Margaret passed. Old habits. The kitchen light was the only one on in the whole house, and I stood at the counter mixing the sage stuffing the same way I'd made it for 31 years, following the handwritten card Margaret had tucked into our recipe box the first Thanksgiving we spent in this house. 1993. We just moved in. The kids were young. The mortgage felt enormous. Now the house was paid off, the kids were grown, and Margaret was gone, and I was standing in the same kitchen, alone, doing what I always did on the fourth Thursday of November. The house is mine. A detached 2-story on Hillcrest Avenue in Barrie, Ontario. 3 bedrooms, a finished basement, a backyard with a shed where I keep my woodworking tools. I bought it with Margaret in 1989, paid it off in 2003, and spent the years since then keeping every inch of it the way she would have wanted. The carpets are older. The furniture is solid and worn in the right places. I like it that way. My daughter Claire called me on a Tuesday evening in April 2 years ago. I was in the shed finishing a small side table when the phone rang. Her voice was tight, the way it gets when she's trying not to cry. Dad thinks I've gotten really bad. Trevor's company lost the Simcoe County contract. They're behind on everything. We might lose the apartment. Come stay here, I told her. For as long as you need. There was a long pause on her end. Trevor won't like accepting help. Then Trevor can find another solution. The offer is for you, and for Lily. Lily was 9 years old and my only grandchild. That was the part that made the decision easy. They arrived on a Friday evening in late April with 2 SUV loads of boxes and a trailer rented from a Canadian Tire on Dunlop Street. Trevor shook my hand in the driveway with that firm, slightly too long grip he always used. The kind that says, I'm not comfortable here, but I'll perform like I am. Gordon, we really appreciate this. It's just temporary. He always called me Gordon. Never Dad, never once in 6 years of marriage to my daughter. Not that it bothered me at first. Stay as long as you need, I told him again. The first few weeks were fine. Claire helped with groceries. Trevor fixed a loose hinge on the back door. Lily and I built a birdhouse together in the shed on a Saturday afternoon, and she painted it yellow, because she said birds like cheerful colors. I still have it on the fence post near the garden. By August, something had shifted. Small things at first. Trevor started leaving his work boots in the front hall instead of the mat by the back door, where I'd always kept shoes. Claire rearranged the spice rack. A reasonable thing on its own. But then Trevor mentioned that the living room furniture was blocking the natural light and he thought we should move the couch to the other wall. I said I liked it where it was. He said it was just an idea. The couch moved 2 weeks later while I was at my Thursday chess game with my friend Dennis. Dennis and I have played chess every Thursday evening for 11 years. We met at the Barrie Public Library's woodworking interest group and discovered we were both the type of men who think better slowly. He's a retired high school principal, 6 years older than me, with the kind of patience that only comes from having spent 3 decades managing teenagers. By November, 14 months after they'd moved in, Trevor had started hosting his own friends here on Friday evenings without mentioning it to me. I'd come downstairs in my housecoat to find 4 people I barely knew sitting around my kitchen table with my good glassware, drinking beer from bottles they'd left rings on the oak surface. I'd refinished myself in 2019. Trevor introduced me to his friends with a laugh. That's Claire's dad. He's been staying with us while he gets sorted out. Gets sorted out? I was 64 years old. I owned the house. I had a pension from 30 years with Ontario Hydro and investments I'd never mentioned to anyone. I was not getting sorted out. I was being erased, slowly, the way fog takes over a field. You don't notice until you can't see the fence posts anymore. That was when I started keeping the notebook. I have a habit from my working years. Write things down. Dates, amounts, conversations, as close to verbatim as I can manage. Margaret used to tease me about it. She called it my evidence binder. She meant it affectionately. I meant it practically. October 2023. First notebook entry. $22,000 transferred to Claire's account to cover 6 months of credit card debt she'd accumulated during the move. She cried on the phone when I told her. She said she paid back. I believed her. February 2024. Second major entry, $8,500 to cover Trevor's HST arrears from his landscaping company. He had to clear them to bid on a new municipal contract. I paid directly to the CRA on his behalf. He shook my hand again. Same grip. The small things compounded. My hydro bill went from $140 a month to $290. My water was triple what it had been. Groceries I paid for were consumed by 4 people, not 1. I calculated it out that spring, sitting at the kitchen table at 5 in the morning. Over 22 months, between the cash transfers and the absorbed living costs, I had spent approximately $68,000. I did not say anything about this. I told Dennis about it on a Thursday in October over the chessboard. He put down his knight and looked at me. Gordon, why are you telling me instead of them? Because there's a right time for everything, I said. He studied the board for a while. There's also a wrong time for everything. Don't let it get to that. I thought about that conversation a lot in the weeks before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving that year fell on the second Monday of October, which in Ontario means a long weekend, and in my house meant the meal I'd been cooking every year since 1989. I was up at 5. The 16-pound turkey went into the oven at 5:15. I had the cranberry sauce started by 6, the squash roasting by 7, the rolls rising on the counter by 8. The house smelled the way it always had. Sage and butter, and the particular sweetness of the squash caramelizing in the oven. By 9 o'clock, Trevor's car was still in the driveway. His brother Derek and Derek's girlfriend Vanessa were arriving at noon. Trevor's former business partner Ray and Ray's wife Sandra had also been invited, though I hadn't been the one to invite them. I'd found out 4 days earlier when Claire mentioned it casually while pouring her morning coffee. Trevor also asked Derek and Ray's family, "Is that okay?" It was my house. It should have been a question asked before the invitation was extended, not after. I said it was fine. Lily came downstairs at 9:30 in her pajamas and stood in the kitchen doorway watching me debone the turkey neck for stock. "Grandpa, why are you doing all the cooking?" "Because I like cooking, sweetheart." She was quiet for a moment. Mom and Dad didn't help last year either. I kept my eyes on what I was doing. Some things take time to change, I told her. She came and stood beside me and watched. I taught her how to tell when a stock is ready by the color and the smell. She was 11 now, curious about everything in exactly the way her grandmother had been. The guests arrived at noon. Trevor met them at the door, as though he'd answered it in his own home for years, which, I reminded myself, he had been doing for nearly 2 years. Derek was loud and familiar, the way people are when they've been told a place is theirs to feel comfortable in. He walked past me in my own kitchen with a firm nod, the acknowledgement you give a household fixture, a reliable appliance. Vanessa at least shook my hand. Ray, I'd met once before. He and Trevor had history together, the kind of complicated business history that gets papered over at social events. Sandra was pleasant. She found me in the kitchen and offered to help. I gave her the rolls to arrange on the board because I appreciated the gesture. Dinner was ready at 1:30. I carried the turkey out on the platter Margaret had bought at a shop in Collingwood in 2001, the oval ceramic one with the blue rim she'd used every single year, until she got sick. I set it at the center of the table. Trevor looked at it and said, "Ray, man, doesn't this look incredible?" Ray said it looked amazing. No one mentioned who had cooked it. I went to take my seat at the head of the table. The chair at the head was where I had sat for 30 years. I bought that table at a furniture shop on Essa Road in 1994, and Margaret and I carried it through the front door in 2 pieces and assembled it ourselves in the dining room because it was too wide for the hallway. I pulled out the chair. Trevor's hand came down on the table. "Actually, Dad," he paused, He had never called me Dad before in 6 years. He had chosen this moment to start. Actually, that's where Derek is sitting. We figured you'd be more comfortable at the end. He gestured toward the far end of the table, the seat that looked into the kitchen, the seat that had always been for guests who arrived last and needed to be fitted in somewhere. I stood there with my hand on the back of my own chair. The room was not quiet, but it felt quiet. Vanessa was pouring water. Sandra was passing the rolls. Derek was talking to Ray about something I couldn't process because I was focused on what had just happened. You'd be more comfortable at the end. I looked at my daughter. Claire was looking at her plate. I want you to understand what that moment felt like. I am 66 years old. I spent 30 years working shifts at Ontario Hydro so that this house could be paid for, so that Claire could go to Georgian College without debt, so that there was always enough. Margaret and I built this life together. And when she was gone, I kept it, because it was the only way I knew how to stay close to her. Every corner of that house had a decision in it that we had made together. The table I was being redirected away from was one of them. I straightened up slowly. Trevor, I said, whose house do you think we're in right now? The question went into the room like a stone into still water. Vanessa stopped pouring. Sandra looked up. Derek's conversation stopped mid-sentence. Trevor looked at me the way men look when they've committed to something and realize too late they've overplayed it. Gordon, come on. Don't make this weird. That's the word he chose. Weird. Lily was watching from her seat at the side of the table. Her eyes were on me, and they were very steady for an 11-year-old. I said very quietly, everyone who is a guest in this house, you are welcome here, and I mean that. But I need a moment with my family. Sandra touched Ray's arm. Ray looked at Trevor. Trevor shook his head almost imperceptibly, but Ray stood up anyway. We'll just step outside for a minute, get some air. Sandra was already reaching for her jacket from the back of her chair. They went through the back door without ceremony, and I was grateful to them for that. Derek stayed seated. Vanessa put her hand on his arm and said nothing. I moved to the chair at the head of the table and sat down. I looked at Trevor. Then I looked at Claire. I want to say something, and I want both of you to hear it clearly. Trevor opened his mouth. Please let me finish. He closed it. I've been quiet for 2 years. I've watched this house get reorganized around me. I've been introduced to guests as an afterthought. I've had decisions made about my space without being consulted. I paid for a great deal of what this family has needed, and I have not asked for recognition or gratitude. But I will not be seated at the foot of my own table on Thanksgiving. Not in this house. Not at this table. Trevor's face went through several things quickly. Surprise then, irritation. Then something that tried to be contempt. You don't own the table anymore, Gordon. You gave us your home. I did not give you my home. You let us move in. That's the same thing. I want to tell you something, Trevor, and I want you to think about what I'm about to say very carefully. I reached into the pocket of my cardigan. I'd put the folded paper there that morning before I started cooking. It was a photocopy. The original was in the fireproof box in my bedroom closet where I keep the deed to the house, Margaret's will, and the documents from the sale of my Ontario Hydro shares in 2020. I unfolded it and placed it on the table. It was a property assessment notice from the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. The name at the top was mine. The address was this address. This house is assessed at $740,000 and it belongs to me. My name is the only name on the deed. You have never paid rent, signed a lease, or contributed to a single utility bill in 22 months. You are guests. Claire's face had gone pale. Trevor stared at the paper. He said, You can't just pull that out at Thanksgiving dinner like some kind of homeowner, I said. Lily made a sound that might have been a laugh that she turned into a cough. Trevor pushed his chair back. He stood up and pointed at me with the particular frustration of a man who has lost an argument and knows it. We're not going anywhere. You can't make us leave. I said, I'm not asking you to leave tonight. Tonight is Thanksgiving. But I want you to understand very clearly where things stand. This is my house. You are welcome here as long as you treat it and me accordingly. That arrangement ends the moment you forget it again." He left the table. I heard him go upstairs. I heard the bedroom door close. Claire looked at me for the first time that evening. Her eyes were wet. "Dad, I'm sorry." "I know, sweetheart. I should have said something sooner. A lot sooner." "I know that too." We ate Thanksgiving dinner, the five of us. Claire, Lily, Derek, Vanessa, and me. Ray and Sandra came back in after a few minutes and sat down without a word, and I was glad of it. The turkey was good. The squash was good. Lily asked me to show her how I made the rolls rise, and I told her I'd teach her on the weekend. Trevor did not come back down. That evening, after the guests left, I called Dennis. He came over the next morning. We sat at the kitchen table with coffee, and I told him everything. He listened the way he always does, without interrupting, until I was finished. Then he said, "Gordon, you need to talk to someone who understands the legal side." "I know a woman," I told him. "Patricia Ashworth. She handled Margaret's estate, family and property law, based in Barry. Call her Monday." I called her Monday. Patricia Ashworth practices out of an office on Collier Street, a calm space with a window that overlooks a small courtyard. She's in her early 50s, with the kind of manner that makes you feel your problem is being taken seriously without being made larger than it is. I brought the notebook. She reviewed it for several minutes without speaking. Then she looked up. "You've documented everything. 30 years in utilities. I keep records. This is very helpful, Mr. Hayes." She paused. "They have no tenancy agreement, no lease, no history of contributing to household expenses. Nothing in their names," I confirmed. "Every bill, every payment, every transfer, all from me." In Ontario, a person who occupies a property without a formal agreement can still claim certain protections under the Residential Tenancies Act if they can demonstrate a landlord-tenant relationship existed. "Do you have anything that could be construed as an agreement to let them stay indefinitely?" I had a card. Claire had sent me a card at Christmas, 14 months after they'd moved in. On the inside, she'd written, "Thank you for opening your home to us, Dad. I keep it in the notebook." Patricia read it. She set it down. She acknowledged it's your home. In writing, she did. If they refuse to leave, we'd need to proceed through the Landlord and Tenant Board. It takes time and it's not without friction. But with documentation like this, your position is very strong. "I don't want to involve the LTB yet," I said. "I want to give them the opportunity to be honest." Patricia nodded slowly. "Then I'd recommend the formal written notice, not an eviction notice yet. A letter establishing clearly that their occupation is conditional on your consent and that consent can be withdrawn. It creates a paper trail and it signals to them that you are serious." She prepared the letter that week. I received it on a Wednesday and reviewed it at the kitchen table while Trevor was out. I placed it in an envelope and left it on the kitchen counter with Trevor's name on it and Claire's name beside it. I want to tell you what happened next, because it matters. Trevor read the letter that evening and came downstairs with it in his hand. His face was the kind of controlled that means the control is working very hard. "You lawyered up." "I consulted a professional, yes." "You're threatening to throw us out." "I'm clarifying a situation that needed clarifying." He put the letter on the counter. "We have nowhere to go, Gordon. Claire's between jobs. I'm rebuilding the business. We can't just Trevor." I kept my voice even. "I am not asking you to leave this week or next week. I am telling you that this is my home and I am its owner, and those facts have not changed and will not change. How we move forward is up to you and Claire. But it moves forward honestly, or it doesn't move forward at all." He left the room without a response. The weeks after that were quieter, in a way that felt like held breath. Trevor stopped hosting his friends on Friday evenings. The good glassware reappeared in the cabinet where it belonged. No one moved furniture. I noticed these changes the way you notice when a sound you've been blocking out finally stops. Claire came to me on a Saturday morning in November, in the kitchen while I was making porridge. She sat down at the table and said, "I didn't know about the HST arrears. What you paid?" I looked at her. She said, "He told me a client had paid in advance. I found the transfer confirmation in his email last week." I wasn't looking for it. I was looking for the car insurance renewal. I turned off the burner and sat down across from her. She said, "How much have you given us?" "Total," I told her. She sat with that for a while. Then she said, "Dad, I owe you that money. I don't care how long it takes." "I know," I said. "That's not what I need from you right now." "What do you need?" "For things to be honest. That's all I've ever needed." We sat there for a few minutes without talking. The kitchen was warm. Outside the window, the leaves on the backyard maple had gone their full October red, and most of them were down now, gathered in drifts against the shed. She said, "I think we need to find our own place." "I think that's right," I said. Trevor didn't agree right away. There was a difficult December, the kind where everyone is polite in a way that costs a great deal of effort. He applied for 2 contracts and got one. A residential landscaping account with a property management company in Innisfil. Enough to start rebuilding. They found an apartment in South Barry in January. 2 bedrooms on Mapleview Drive, close to the school Lily would be transferring to. The rent was manageable on 2 incomes if Claire went back to the administrative work she'd left when Lily was small. The day they loaded the moving truck, I helped carry boxes. Trevor and I worked side by side in the cold without talking much, which was fine. At the end, after Claire and Lily had gone ahead in the car, he stood in my driveway and said something I hadn't expected. "I got comfortable, Gordon. I forgot what the situation actually was. That's on me." I said, "I know." He nodded once, that same handshake quality to it, and then he got in the truck and left. I stood in the driveway until I couldn't hear the truck anymore. The house was mine again. The driveway was quiet. A chickadee landed on the fence post near Lily's birdhouse, the yellow one, and looked at me for a moment before flying off. I called Patricia Ashworth that afternoon and told her the situation had resolved without the LTV process. She said, "That's the best outcome. For everyone." "I think so too," I told her. I filed the civil claim in February, $68,000, documented, with payment terms I worked out through Patricia's office. Claire accepted the terms without argument. Trevor contested briefly through a phone call his own lawyer made to Patricia, and then he didn't contest anymore. The documentation was too clear. The payment plan was fair. They would each contribute according to what they could manage. Claire called me after the agreement was signed. "I don't resent you for this," she said. "I want you to know that." "Good, because I didn't do it to hurt you. I know why you did it." She paused. "Lily keeps asking when she can come for her next baking lesson. Tell her Saturday works." Dennis and I played chess on a Thursday evening in late February, the first genuinely cold night of the year, with the wind off Lake Simcoe doing what it always does in winter, which is remind you that it exists and that you are not as warm as you think you are. He moved his bishop, and I saw the opening immediately, but waited 3 moves to take it, the way you do when patience is the point. "You seem different," he said. "I feel like myself again." He considered that for a while. Was it worth it? All of it? All of it. I thought about the Thanksgiving table. I thought about Margaret's platter. I thought about Lily painting a birdhouse yellow, because birds like cheerful colors. "I'm not sure worth it is the right question," I told him. "Some things just needed to be true. The house is mine. My name is on the deed." That was always true, but for a while I let it not feel true, and that was my mistake as much as anyone else's. He moved his rook. "You should have said something sooner." "Margaret told me that once," I said. "About something else entirely." She was right then, too. I moved my knight, and the game shifted, and outside the window the snow was coming down in the long, steady way it does when it means to stay. That's where I am now. The house is mine. The table is where it belongs. On Saturday mornings, Lily comes over, and we make something in the kitchen together, whatever she wants to learn that week. Last week it was Bannock, because her teacher had talked about it in class and she wanted to understand it, by making it. The week before, butter tarts, because they're mine and always have been. Claire calls on Sundays. Trevor and I exist in the careful, polite way of people who have arrived at a mutual understanding through difficulty, which is not warmth, but it is not nothing. I go to the shed on weekday afternoons when the light is good. I am building a blanket chest, pine and maple, fitted joints, no hardware, something that will last. I think about what goes into it while I work. Good wood, good time, patience. Margaret would have had something to say about all of it. She would have been right, and I would have written it down. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not the Thanksgiving confrontation, not the lawyer's office, not even the day they finally drove away with the moving truck. It's the morning after they left, when I walked through every room in my house alone, and the only sound was the furnace kicking on and the particular creak of the third stair that I've never bothered to fix because Margaret always said it was how she knew I was coming home. I think about cause and effect a lot now. Not in any mystical sense, just the plain mechanical kind. The idea that what you allow, you teach. For 2 years I allowed Trevor to introduce me as an afterthought in my own kitchen, allowed my furniture to be moved without a conversation, allowed my name to be quietly removed from a life I had built. None of that happened because Trevor was especially cunning. It happened because I kept quiet, and silence, I learned, gets interpreted as agreement. Every time I said nothing, I was effectively saying yes. That's the part that took me the longest to sit with, honestly. What I didn't lose, even when I was losing almost everything else, was my records, the notebook, the bank statements, the Christmas card where Claire wrote your home in her own handwriting. I kept those not out of suspicion, but out of habit. The same habit that got me through 30 years of shift work at Ontario Hydro without a single missing timesheet. There's a kind of clear-headedness in documentation. It forces you to see things as they actually are, not as you wish they were or fear they might be. When I finally sat across from Patricia Ashworth and opened that notebook, I wasn't angry. I was just accurate. And accuracy, I found, is almost always enough. The hardest thing wasn't pulling out the property assessment at that Thanksgiving table. The hardest thing was the months before that, when I understood what was happening and hadn't yet decided what to do about it. That stretch of time, knowing something is wrong and not yet having the nerve to say so. That's where most of the damage happens. Not just your finances or your furniture or your sense of where you belong in your own home. To something quieter. The part of you that knows what you're worth and needs to be reminded of it occasionally by your own actions. I'm not proud that it took 2 years. I am glad it didn't take 3. Claire is doing the work now. She calls on Sundays. She makes her monthly payment without being reminded. Last month, she brought Lily over on a Saturday, and the two of them helped me stain the blanket chest I've been building in the shed. And afterward, we had soup at the kitchen table and nobody moved anything or said anything that needed to be taken back. That's not nothing. It's actually quite a lot. Trevor and I exist at a careful distance that may, in time, become something warmer. I'm not in a hurry. Some things take as long as they take. What I want anyone to take from this, if anything, is simpler than it sounds. Being decent to the people you love doesn't mean absorbing every cost without limit. Knowing where you stand and saying so clearly isn't cruelty. It's the one thing that makes honest relationships possible. And when you've been pushed to the edge of your own life, the ability to stand back up quietly and without drama, with your records in order, and your name still on the deed, that's not a small thing. That's exactly the kind of thing Margaret would have called common sense. She would have been right. She usually was.